Hey, warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Kevin Sweeney. He does such great work over at Sports Illustrated, aka SI. We're going to chat with him about what we're all seeing with these court cases, the fact that the NCAA got a few wins in the court cases. You don't see that very often, so we're going to be talking about that. We'll also be chatting it up with him about some of these teams that are going to be very heavily impacted by everything that we're getting right now in college basketball, who has the most to gain/lose, how big of a roll the dice it is for these teams that are signing fifth-year guys, because we have no idea if they're going to be eligible or not, so we've got a lot that is happening on that front, and also chat with them about what we're seeing over at St. John's, with them signing Keyshawn Hall, which obviously he's another one of those guys where we do not know if he's going to be eligible or not, so we have to chat about that here in segment number 1. I have to recap the fact that we saw some moves in college basketball with a few players that went elsewhere, and we also saw Tennessee and Ohio. The stays went in favor of the NCAA, what that all means as well, so we've got a lot to chat about today. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, Larsium, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And of course, I do beg with you, plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. That helps me know what you all want to hear on this podcast and helps me out in terms of making this the greatest college basketball season of all time. Fortunately, we've got a lot to talk about right now with all these court cases, what have you, but certainly that is always appreciated. And how about if we first things first tackle the fact that Tennessee and Ohio both stayed in favor of the NCAA and what that all means in terms of eligibility. Oh, by the way, we've got a few other conferences that are banning former professional players, so we'll get into that as well. But in terms of these two court cases with Tennessee and now Ohio out of the fold, that means that the likes of Philip Porter-Vicinin, MJ Collins and company, they remain ineligible. And for the Tennessee case, it was Jalen Washington, Jendell Weaver, Sam Alexis, MJ Benson, BJ Edwards, Cameron Fens, Brody Robinson, AJ Storr, that's a big one, Jason Edwards, along with Daniel Igbeniwe, Terrence Gunyard, Doug McDaniel, and Jalen Johnson, that are all going to be currently out of the fold. So this affects quite a few teams. Tennessee, Indiana, UNLV, all currently teams that are affected. Gunyard, he was the top scorer for Duquesne, so that's a little bit of an issue for them, but he wasn't transferring. He was just going to be staying with Duquesne, but there are a lot of pieces that are currently being impacted by this. We've also got Malik Messina Moore, who was supposed to be going to Illinois State. He was a part of the Ohio case, so right now, the 3 state cases are off the board: Colorado, Tennessee, Ohio. Those guys aren't eligible. Anyone from Georgia, California, Kentucky, New York, and that's Vincent Iwuchukwu, so one guy. Louisiana, Texas, and South Carolina, that involves Malik Renew. Currently, they're all good to go, but that could be changing within the next few days and the next few weeks. And Seth Trimble was originally a part of the Ohio case. He's now gone over to the Kentucky case, so you might be seeing a lot more of these guys doing that. And Mark Mitchell is another one of those guys that is now involved with the Kentucky case as well. So we've got a lot of moving parts. If you're having a tough time keeping track of who's all eligible/ineligible, don't worry, that is all of us right now. So we've got a ton that is happening there, but the NCAA actually winning some court cases. Something that I never thought we would see happen, but something that we are seeing happening right now. And we saw some W's for mid-major programs. How about Dominic Nelson? He 2 seasons ago was a rock-solid player over at Utah Valley. And I mean, he was good over at Iowa State last season as well, but he has decided that he is going to be going back to Utah State, a team that is really looking to build themselves up in year number 1 out there in the Big West. Nelson last year was only averaging about 4 points per game over at Iowa State 2 seasons ago for Utah Valley. Was Mr. Do-It-All for them. Not necessarily a guy that would bomb it from 3, but 14.5 points, 5 boards, a steal per contest as a 6'5", little bit of a do-it-all guy. That is huge for a Utah State team that their backbone is very much defense. They were always close but no cigar in terms of trying to break through and make the NCAA tournament out there in the WAC. Now they're going to have to go a little bit more of a difficult route, as now they have to try to do so out there in a Big West, in which it's a step up in competition. But still, with this Utah Valley team, I think that they're going to be out there right away, becoming a top 3, top 4 team. You bring back Braden Housley, who I really like. Sherma Weatherspoon is a guy that's able to give you some good offense. You've also got Isaac Davis, who was a nice player for the team last season as well. Isaac Hawkins, so Isaac squared there. I really do like the way that this roster is coming together. Coach Phillips, very rock solid there, so that was some good news for them. And then you also saw Northern Colorado get some very good news. Langston Reynolds, too. He was good over at Minnesota last year. 11.5 points, 4.5 assists, 4.3 rebounds per game. I recognize that it wasn't the world's greatest year for Minnesota last year, but Nico Medved is a heck of a coach. Reynolds, 2 seasons ago, when he was over at Northern Colorado, was averaging 16 points per game. He is heading right on back there, and when he was over at Northern Colorado 2 seasons ago, it was on a small sample size of threes, but shot 41% for 3 at Northern Colorado, 16 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Now he's got a year under his belt of starting in the Big Ten. I think that this is going to be massive for them. So we're starting to see these mid-major programs decide to roll the dice on these guys, and it seems like something that could be very fruitful. That is, if they're going to be eligible, because I saw a whole bunch of guys becoming eligible on Wednesday. And then we've got more news out of the SEC, because on Tuesday they decided that they were going to be banning these guys that declared for the NFL, NBA, G League, what have you, and did not properly withdraw. And the penalties that the SEC is going to be levying for these teams that do not follow the rules is going to be a head coach suspension for 50% of the years, a fine equal to 50% of the sport's annual operating budget, and SEC voting privileges on business matters will be revoked. So they are taking this incredibly seriously. They do not want these former professionals to be able to go back to where they came. And the Big 12, they unanimously adopted a policy prohibiting professional athletes from returning as well. That was from Yahoo Sports, and the Big 12 directors, they supported the measure before faculty athletic representations, and it was formally approved on Wednesday evening. I know that this has yet to go through yet. Maybe by the time this podcast is up, it does get passed, but the Pac-12 is looking at doing it something very similarly as well. So we've got a lot that is going on with these former professionals, and it's not just college basketball, it's also college football, because we're seeing guys leave training camps and try to head back to places like LSU, what have you. So big giant ball of wax right now in the sport. We've got guys that are moving around. We've got all these court cases as to whether or not these guys are going to be able to be eligible or not. So there's a ton there. And coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Kevin Sweeney? He does such great work over at Sports Illustrated. He's also with Basket Under Review. We have to talk about all that we saw on Wednesday, these moving pieces, and so much more right here on Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN, because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as Kevin Sweeney is doing such great work over at Sports Illustrated, aka SI Now. Additionally, I know that he's doing a great job over there at Basket Under Review with Truly Donovan's website. I know that here Eric Fawcett do a nice job with their show over there. Kevin, he's dialed in on college basketball, and I know that he's getting set to try to be able to rank every one of these teams for the upcoming college basketball season. Always a labor of love with now 366 teams. You're able to follow me on the old Twitter/X at CBB_Central. And Kevin, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
What's going on, Greg? Great to be with you.
Always great to have you aboard. And with this offseason, Kevin, man, it has been absolutely wild and crazy what we've seen. We saw on Wednesday even more news with these conferences like the SEC, who on Tuesday, they were the first to crack down on these pros. It looks like the Pac-12 is looking to do so as well. And just how do we take a look at this landscape where now it feels like the conferences are trying to govern because the NCAA isn't?
Yeah, it's complicated for sure. It really represents more than anything a reality that the NCAA has really struggled in court with these initial injunctions. And that's been more pressing on the football side than the basketball side because football is approaching cut day in the NFL. And I think they were worried that, 50 to 100 guys might try to come back, whereas in reality, basketball is working through these things on a much slower timeline. So I think that was the rub of it. Then now the timing of that came at the same time as the RJ Lewis saga sort of coming to a head at LSU. That maybe contributed to things a bit for the SEC and saying, hey, we don't want guys coming back. But look, there's an understanding that it's going to be hard to keep all the 5-for-5 guys out. Certainly a possibility to keep some of them out. And to limit their impact as much as possible. It seems like that's the NCAA's goal, and then that has trickled down to the conferences as they've seen the NCAA struggle. But the NCAA has had some wins lately here. They won the stay in Colorado, the stay in Ohio. Now just today, got to stay in, or Wednesday, they got to stay in Tennessee. So they're having some success appealing these rulings, and it's creating even more kind of chaos and change minute by minute to rosters than I think a lot of people would have expected.
Yeah, it's been wild what we've been seeing there. And man, this is going to be insane to try to be able to piecemeal this all together because as of right now, with regards to court cases, you mentioned it, the NCAA, they were able to get a few W's here over the last week or so. Ohio is now out of the fold, and I know that there's guys like Seth Trimble that he was a part of, I believe, that Ohio case that he's trying now in a different state to be able to get eligibility. And how do we take a look at this? Because there are a few states where these guys are eligible. They're all good to go. I mentioned the Ohio and Colorado cases. Those are not good to go. And then we did see, with regards to everything on Wednesday as well, Tennessee, I know that their stay by the NCAA, that was granted. The NCAA got a W out there. And if I'm not mistaken, there's something happening with the South Carolina case now as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, the challenging thing is like this isn't necessarily done with, right? Ohio is not eligible for now, but those guys are working through the appeals process. It sounds like maybe sometime in September, we'll have a bit more clarity on that situation. So it's a holding pattern as much as anything. And I think it's, quite frankly, it's the worst case scenario in that we have, several different court cases operating on several different timelines that could come to several different conclusions, right? Like the idea that someone who sued as part of the California lawsuit might be eligible, but the guy who sued in Ohio isn't, is ridiculous. But that's the balance of the current state of affairs. And, if you're operating solely from the view of like, how can you create the most competitive, balanced environment? My opinion would be, hey, why don't we just greenlight everybody? But at the same time, the NCAA is sitting here looking at it like, okay, so like we said everybody was ineligible. People moved without, people moved on it anyway. We're winning in court, which means we have the right side of the issue. Why should we back down now? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so, I just think it's fascinating. I think there's a lot more to do in the next 2 months before games tip off. And I don't envision us having an answer in the next week of yes, these guys will 100% play, or no, these guys 100% won't.
Yep, it's just wild to say the least what we've been seeing out there as Kevin Sweeney does an amazing job over at Sports Illustrated, AKSI. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And if you're one of these teams that has one of these fifth-year guys, because obviously Xavier, Cincinnati, right now they're a little bit left out in the cold with everything that we saw on Wednesday. Now Indiana, they're going to be without one or two of their guys as well. I know that AJ Storr was a part of those guys that are now ineligible. Oklahoma, there's a lot of teams that are being impacted, and is it probably best to just stay away from these fifth-year guys? Because if you're trying to gamble on these fifth-year guys, you have no idea when they're going to be eligible, if they're going to be able to practice, and maybe if they get eligibility, it might not be until games are already being played.
I think for the vast majority of teams, they were either taking guys when they wouldn't have taken another guy anyway, right? So like Indiana's a good example of that. Like they were not going to take another big. They were done. And then, had the opportunity to bring back Sam Alexis and said, all right, like we might as well roll roll the dice, ride the wave with you. If you're eligible, great. It helps our team. If it doesn't, like, we felt pretty good about where we're at. So you're in that spot, or you're in the spot like Oklahoma, which is, man, we had a really rough summer. And not only did we not feel like we looked great, but we lost a guy, Cole Gack, who's ineligible due to the pro stuff now. So we need a center and we need help in the backcourt. Like, we need to be better if we're going to compete in the SEC. So we're going to go spend a bunch of money and go get BJ Edwards and go get Duke Brennan. But like in either of those situations, right, both Indiana's spot or the Oklahoma situation, like you don't really have an alternative. You can't go out and say, okay, we're going to not have these guys because either you're going to like for Indiana, like you can say, oh, we don't want them, but like it's only upside, no downside. And if you're Oklahoma, like if you think you stink without them, you might as well have them and roll the dice. So I think the operative move is probably to just ride the wave and hope for the best. But I do think that, you know, we'll probably see the market slow down a little bit. And we were seeing that anyway with school starting at most of these places. But like, if you haven't made a commitment to one of these guys already, you might say, yeah, this just isn't worth the trouble.
Yep, I think so as well. And man, just a fascinating ordeal to say the least out there. And Kevin, I know that some of the most impacted schools are out there in more of the, shall we say, southern part of the country. With Oklahoma, they had a rough offseason. They bring in BJ Edwards, who's now ineligible. Texas Tech, they're trying to bring back Donovan Atwell. They're trying to bring in JaMychal Stillwell. Darian Williams is back in the fold as well. Would you view those as the teams with the most gain, with those teams being with the most to gain and lose? I think that those are up there. And then I think the obvious one as well is LSU, because that's pretty much your entire roster at this point.
Yeah, I would say those are probably the big three in terms of, you know, the biggest swing one direction or another. Most of the other teams, it's one individual player, right? It's like, okay, if I'm Florida, I would love to have Denzel Aberdeen. They can function without Denzel Aberdeen. But when you're talking 2, 3, 4 guys, you know, there's a couple other teams that have multiple, right? You know, you look at, you know,
Gonzaga.
Gonzaga got 2. West Virginia has 2 with Javen Buchanan and Brennan Lorient. Oklahoma State has 2 with Parsifala and Cashy Nat. So, like, all those teams, you feel it. But I would say, you know, the really big 3, big 4 of Oklahoma, Texas Tech, LSU, and Gonzaga are the teams that really need these guys to be as good as they want to be.
And I will ask you the most difficult question anyone can be asked, because none of us know how the NCAA operates. None of us know what's happening right now. At the end of the day, do you think that these guys are actually going to be eligible or not? Like, we're not going to hold you to this answer. This is not where you're wagering money on this or anything like that. So do not worry there. But just in your heart of hearts, do you think that these guys are going to be out there night number one? Because about 10 or so days ago, I certainly thought so. But with the NCAA winning these court cases, I feel like it's really starting to turn.
As much of a toss-up as there is, I would be shocked if all players don't play, but I'd also be shocked if everyone does. So I think we're in a spot where we'll have a piecemeal approach, and some guys will be able to play based on their individual injunctions, but we won't have a sort of federal standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so tough to be taking a look at, to say the least, as Kevin Sweeney, who does such amazing work over at Sports Illustrated, AKSI, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then another team with a lot to gain / lose, that'd be St. John's, because they inked a big-time player in Keyshawn Hall about 24 to 48 hours ago as this is coming out. And how do you take a look at the state of that program? Because I really do think that they need Keyshawn Hall. Even though they signed Tonde Yusufu, I have some question marks with the backcourt, with all the pieces that they lose. Obviously, Zuby Ejiofor is now out, and part of the reason why I think that St. John's needs it so bad is a little bit less of them, but because, as well, the Big East, with these teams like Xavier, Marquette, Providence, I feel like the entire Big East got better this offseason.
Yeah, 100%. No, you really don't know what to make of St. John's right now. You've taken 2 of these 5-year guys. You have multiple international guys that are still receiving quite a bit of scrutiny from the NCAA. You have Yesufu kicking around, who's very talented, but what does he contribute to winning? How do all these pieces fit? I mean, Yesufu, Ian Jackson, and Keyshawn Hall have all never met a shot they didn't like. It's fascinating, right? Like, how can Rick navigate that? And then you add this added uncertainty, like, will they actually be able to play or not? Nobody really knows. So, yeah, if you told me you think St. John's looks more like a bubble team and you think St. John's is a top 10 team, like, I would believe both of those sentiments. I think it's really more a question of like who's actually on the roster and playing when we get to November 2nd.
Yep, I think so as well. And then we're going to keep this one a little bit more open-ended, because there's been a lot of moves over the last few weeks. There have been a lot of players that have signed. Obviously, BYU is now involved with this as well, with hoping and praying that they're going to get Jackson Kaler out there on the floor. But has there been a team or two that you've really changed your opinion on over the last few weeks? Like, it could even be over the last 48 or 72 hours with everything that we're seeing with these court cases, but just a team or two that now you're feeling a little bit different about them, whether that be to the positive or the negative with everything that's been happening here recently.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple like massive winners in the mid-major world. You move up Northern Colorado, probably like 30 to 40 spots nationally by getting Langston Reynolds back. I mean, this guy who averaged 11, 4 and 4 in the Big Ten. He's headed to the Big Sky. Same thing for Montana State. Jed Miller was maybe the best guard in the league last year. He's all of a sudden coming back. We saw a couple weeks ago, this is a guy who's, I think, covered in the Ohio injunction, so he's ineligible right now, but maybe he will be eligible in the future. Jackson Paveletzky going back to Ohio. That was a huge deal. Antoine Woolfolk going back to Miami, Ohio. So a lot of these mid-major teams, as you said, man, like it was just hard to stack up talent-wise, nationally with the NIL and trying to keep up in the portal. They've really moved the needle. And so, there's probably a more comprehensive list you could make, but that was pretty notable to me to see some of these pretty good mid-major teams in their respective leagues be able to add pieces like that. And those will be certainly to monitor, I know, for the gambling world and the futures markets of, hey, if those are still available right now, if they haven't been taken down, if they existed in the first place, maybe it's time to sprinkle it. Or, if a guy becomes ineligible, and now we have, that changes the picture as well.
Yep, we've got a lot of intrigue right now in college basketball. There's a lot of moving parts, and Kevin, you're doing your level best to be able to take a look at it all. It's not easy for any of us, but you're doing one of the best jobs out there. I know you're over there doing a great job with Eric Fawcett over at Basket Under Review. You're doing a great job over at Sports Illustrated. You somehow, some way need to rank all these teams prior to the start of the season, which I'm sure that this has been the biggest project of your life and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all in tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, getting our preview content going at SI now, SI.com. A lot of good stuff there, but also covering the eligibility stuff. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to talk some actual basketball here at some point. Should be coming soon.
Yeah, that would be very nice. To be able to talk about actual players out there on the floor would be swell, but in the meantime, our good friend Kevin, he's doing a great job holding it down, looking at this game in so many different fronts. So a big thanks to Kevin for joining me on Cuss Cuss Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuss Cuss Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUnit_D1. Keep in mind, Lord CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we've got a lot of wild and crazy stuff happening in college basketball right now. I'm doing my best to keep you guys up to date there. But additionally, we're going to keep the conference previews rolling. I plan on doing the SoCon on the podcast tomorrow. I'm trying to go for as many of these conferences that are not going to be impacted, or if they are, it's going to be very minimally by these fifth-year players as humanly possible. We've got a lot of court cases. We've got a lot of tomfoolery, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. I've been for over 2,450 straight days, so I'm going to keep you guys all abreast of it and try to make this the greatest college basketball season of all time. Then when we're back in season, picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.